One video with differing perspectives.
The police shooting death of Takaya Young captured by police body cameras.
Shots fired.
I understand why it could be justified, but again, I don't make that decision. Ultimately, a grand jury is going to make that decision.
I think the video is going to speak for itself.
I still can't quite understand why his gun came out.
We bring you team coverage. You'll hear from the people touched by the shooting.
And you'll see the video for yourself next on NBC4 at 5.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? And I'm going to jump right in. I figure that there's a lot of people having conversations about this content, about this tragic incident. A mother, pregnant mother of 2, who was gunned down by local police in Columbus. And Columbus, Ohio, to be specific. So what I wanted to do was offer my 20 plus years of law enforcement experience and give my perspective. Overall, I'll say this much, but I'm going to save my comments until later on in the video, so stick around. But I'll say this much. My primary complaints are twofold. Twofold are my primary complaints. But without further ado, let's jump into the initial news video. I will not be showing the incident, the exact moment of the shooting, because I know how YouTube is, and I know they'll suppress this information and this video won't go out. But I have a lot of information and a different perspective that I think could be very beneficial to everyone out there. So if you know anyone who's been having a conversation about this video, please, about the shooting, please share my video as we dive in right now.
Now, breaking news from NBC4.
Body camera footage released today from the deadly shooting at Kroger in Glendon Township last Thursday.
This comes 8 days after 21-year-old Takaya Young was shot in the store parking lot on Sunbury Road. Young was pregnant when she was shot and also leaves behind 2 children. Now, we do want to warn you, the images you are about to see will be graphic and disturbing.
We are urging and warning viewers right now would be the time to leave the room or mute the TV if you do not want to watch.
We are also bringing you team coverage tonight. Caleb Michael has the response from the family's attorney. Eric Halperin is getting reactions from local law enforcement. But we begin with NBC4's Jamie Ostroff, who is here to walk us through this newly released video. Jamie?
Yeah, so this video comes from the body-worn cameras from each of the 2 officers who were involved in the incident last Thursday.
If you just jumped in, I just want to let you know that I'm going to let this news clip or a few minutes of this news presentation play through, and then I'll come back out. I'll read some additional details. I'll share a few of my thoughts. Won't get into too much detail, but then there is a review that the Columbus police had asked a former sheriff to do. And then once that I'll show that content, then I'll pause it here and there to offer my personal opinion. Once again, for those of you who are unfamiliar with me, I have a 20-plus year law enforcement background. I spent 3.5 years as a corrections officer in the state of Indiana. Moved to Las Vegas, began working for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department under at the Clark County Detention Center. I did that for 10 years. Then I spent my final 8 or so years on patrol as a police officer with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. So that's a perspective, and as well as more information I'll give, but I don't want to bore y'all with those facts. We'll talk about that here shortly as I go into a much more of a discussion and critique on the details. So let's jump back into the video. Again, I'm going to let this play through, and then I'll offer my comments afterwards.
Each of those videos is just over 1 minute long as the confrontation with Takaya Young plays out in just a matter of seconds. The first officer to interact with Takaya Young approaches her car under the suspicion that she stole liquor from Kroger.
Hey, stop. Hey, out of the car. Out of the car.
By the time the second officer gets to the car and walks in front of it, the first officer had asked Young to get out 5 times.
He keeps asking. Young argues. You can hear the exchange on that officer's body-worn camera.
Out of the car. Out of the car. They said you're still stuff. Do not leave. Get out of the car. Then get out. No. Then get out. Get out of the car.
Young begins to drive. In this freeze frame, you can see the car make contact with the officer standing at the front of the car as his feet leave the ground. That is when that officer fires one shot through the windshield. We've paused the video to not show that deadly shot. When we pick up the video a moment later, you can hear the commands continue. The car rolls through the parking lot, stopping under the awning by the store. The video ends with officers busting the driver's side window to get Young out of the car.
Now, while Young argues with one of the officers, she denies, as you heard, stealing anything from Kroger. And I just want to walk you back to what she said. She said, quote, "Are you going to shoot me?" Those are the last words you heard from Takaya Young. Also, you may have noticed Blendon Township Police did not identify either of the officers, even blurred their faces. Chief John Belford said that is because of Marcy's law, is what he alluded to, claiming the two officers are crime victims, and the chief believes their identities are protected by state law. Now, one question I did have about that confrontation is why the officer placed himself in front of the car, which was running, and whether that was an appropriate tactic. I took that question to a use of force expert who is not connected to this case, and we'll hear his perspective at 5:30.
You.
Well, Jen and Jared, Sean Walton, the family attorney for Takaya Young's family, says that this situation is heartbreaking and that she did not have to die. I also got the chance to talk to some of her friends today who tell me she was the life of the party. It was always a good time when Takaya was around. They tell me that she loved her two little boys to death and was also very close with her family. Now, today was a hard day for the family, as you can imagine, as they got to see that body cam video from the Blendon Township Police Department for the very first time. Video, someone needs to be held.
Now, they're going to have a conversation with some social justice advocate. I wanted to play his thoughts, his perspective, and again, I will comment here shortly.
Responsible.
I would love to sit up here and say, like, we can reform the system, but we've been making the reforms after every single death, and nothing is changing. We say more training. You know, we fund these police stations, and we go, yeah, more training is the right answer. Training is not the answer in this case. That officer was trained correctly and still messed up. There has to be accountability on that police officer and on the police station itself.
Jen and Jared, as you all touched on, Connor Grubb is the officer we now know that was involved in this incident. Attorneys with the family were pushing for his name to be publicly released today. We're told at this time that Grubb is on leave pending a review. Local for you in Blendon Township, I'm Caleb Michael, NBC4.
All right. So right now, what we have is, I just wanted to, once again, I wanted to play this news clip and show you some of the details. Again, I will not be showing the actual shooting because I know YouTube they may take the entire video down, and I do not want that. I do not want that at all. I want to make sure that this content goes out there and this conversation can be heard, because every time there's an incident, a high-profile shooting, people retreat to their corners and the fighting begins. So hopefully my perspective, with my training and knowledge, I can help out. I can offer a bit of insight. So we're going to jump into another video. Actually, not another video. What I want to do is I want to share some additional details of the incident. And then, again, as I mentioned earlier, here we go. Sorry about that. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be discussing more of it. I'll be sharing exactly my perspective with my background. So let me read this. These are just some of the event details. Hopefully y'all can see that. If you have any issues seeing that, let me know. But it looks like it's coming across. The video clip mentioned a lot of this, or the news clip mentioned a lot of this, but hopefully this will kind of fill in a few of the gaps. On August 24th, 2023, Blendon Township police officers were assisting a driver locked out of her car in a Kroger parking lot on Sunbury Road. As the officers were helping, a Kroger employee pointed out that one of the to one of the officers that someone had stolen bottles of alcohol from the store. At that moment, fleeing. Store employees later reported that several suspects had been stealing items, but the other suspects had fled in other cars. However, this particular female suspect who had been pointed out to the officers was in a Lexus sedan with no license tags, parked in a handicapped spot right in front of the store. All right, so these are some of the opening details. The Franklin County coroner identified the suspect as 21-year-old Takaya Young and confirmed she was pregnant. Young started the car. One officer approached from the driver's side and ordered Young to stop and get out of her car. She ignored the order. Another officer came in front of the car and also ordered Young to get out of the car, despite being ordered to get out of the car more than a dozen times. She refused to do so. Young put the car in gear and accelerated forward. The officer who was directly in the path of the oncoming car fired one shot through the windshield, the front windshield. The car kept moving and officers ran after it for about 50 feet. It then came to a stop on the sidewalk outside the store. Because the driver's door had been locked, officers immediately broke the driver's window so they could attend to Young and begin medical assistance. Officers also immediately called for EMS. The officer who fired the shot sprinted to his car to get a trauma kit, which he quickly deployed. A passing ER doctor assisted. Young died at St. Anna's Hospital, which was the closest ER. The two officers' names, age, and race were not immediately released, but in the video, in the news clip, they gave some more details. They're on paid administrative leave while the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation examines the shooting, which is standard in cases of police use of deadly force. Young was expected to give birth to a daughter in November. She also was the mother of two young sons, ages 6 and 3. Man, I mean, just reading that is absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, there's no other way you can. This whole incident was completely unnecessary on multiple fronts, in my personal opinion. And again, the one factor that I want to bring in, I want to mention right now is that we need to understand certain aspects of this, because I've heard different people say, hey, they're quick to want to jump on the officers for their decisions. And I think in this case that there are moments, there's a particular situation where that is justified, no doubt about it. And once again, I'll be getting into that shortly. But there's always responsibility. And let me just share something with you really quick as we progress to move forward, as we seek to move forward. Then I'm discussing, I don't want any dead time here, but I'm going to just, and this, because I find that often when situations, incidents like this occur in many cases, and this is on both sides of the argument, both sides of the political aisle, both sides of the debate, people are quick to voice their opinion with little information. And I've been pretty silent overall over the last few days as this issue has grown and been discussed more and more. But I'm going to share with you Proverbs 18, verse 2. Proverbs 18, verse 2. A fool takes no delight in understanding, but only in airing his own opinion. Okay, let's keep that in mind from now on, that a fool takes no delight in understanding and only airing his own opinion. We, especially for those of y'all here who are professing Christ followers, professing Christians, we should be the last ones to jump to conclusions, because in light of recent years, let's be real, in light of recent years with the Jacob Blake incident, the Kyle Rittenhouse incident, the incident with the Catholic high school kids at the Capitol, Rayshard Brooks, Jussie Smollett, how many times have people reacted thinking that they knew all the details and then later on was made to look like a fool as the data surfaced, the facts came out, body cam footage came out. In particularly the Jacob Blake, that's one of the ones that really stands out for me the most, because you had rioting in the streets, which really nowadays is no shock, unfortunately. But you had rioting in the streets over an allegation of the police shooting an unarmed black man in the back. But as time went on, weeks, months later, the truth came out. Jacob Blake already had a restraining order against him. He was there illegally. He was in possession of a knife, initially tased by the police, pulled the taser prongs out, picked up his knife, and began walking towards the front, unknown area from the police officer's perspective, unknown area up to inside the vehicle. Then the police officers shot him. Even by his own admission. If you don't believe it, all you have to do is scroll through my videos here if you're watching me on YouTube, under Code Red Conversations, and you will see that he was being interviewed by Good Morning America and actually admitted the reality that he had a knife in his hand and he was walking away. And he said, I was just going to put the knife away in my car. You have to, where you have to understand that the officer doesn't know your intent. You're fighting with him, resisting arrest, and then you proceed to walk away. You pick up a knife and you walk away. That officer may not have known what you had. So I say all this to say, I hope and pray that more of us have learned our lesson, that to stop jumping to conclusions and assuming we know all the details when we don't, and be patient with the facts. So with that being said, let's jump to this next video where I will definitely offer more of my personal opinion and personal critique as all this information is being made known. I will share with you my concerns, my issues, and there are a couple, definitely. Let's see if this is it here. Yes, here we go. Sorry about that. Just want to make sure we have all the content and I don't have any dead time, because I want y'all to hear some of these thoughts so we can be better prepared to actually have a serious discussion about this incident. Now, again, this is a former law enforcement officer a former sheriff, if I'm not mistaken. I believe he's a use of force expert, possibly, or at the very least, a subject matter expert. He's going to be giving his take, and I'll be offering mine as we go. And again, not only did my law enforcement career involve 20 years in law enforcement, but I was a firearms instructor. I was an active shooter response instructor. I was a defensive tactics instructor while I worked for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Tactics and all these things related to use of force has been a passion of mine for years. Code Red Conversations started out as primarily a channel addressing police uses of force, but as time went on and YouTube kept giving me the blues, and my passions grew more in other areas, more worldview issues, I decided to expand it into dealing with a much more varied level of topic or types of topics. So let's jump into this video here.
I'm Russ Martin, former Delaware County Sheriff and Chief of Police for the City of Delaware. I worked in law enforcement for more than 40 years before recently retiring. I have no connection to the Blendon Township Police Department, but they asked me to provide and review some context that might be helpful to the general public about the body-worn camera video from the tragic officer-involved shooting that recently happened. I want to be clear. I won't be making any conclusions about whether what the officer did was right or wrong. That's the job of other agencies. I'll simply offer analysis similar to what any investigator might look at when reviewing body-worn camera video of a use of force incident. Let's take a look at the video. Police Officer 1 was already in the front of the Kroger parking lot after a citizen called and asked for help after locking herself out of her car. This is a common call for police. We can see that he's using tools police carry in their car to try to open the locked car door. Police Officer 2, who had just finished with a nearby car accident, is on the scene and also tries to help unlock the citizen's car.
Move up a bit.
The Kroger employee tells Officer 2 that the woman getting into the black Lexus has just stolen things from the store. Police officers routinely may be focused on one task in a public setting, then, when abruptly interrupted, must then redirect focus to a more pressing matter.
All right, I want to pause right there. So already the officers had legal justification to be on the scene. Let's make that clear. They were dealing with a citizen who was in distress, who had another issue. They were seeking to help him out, or him or her out. They were notified by a store employee that someone who had just stolen something from the store was right there. So you as an officer are going to do your job and make contact. So you already have, he didn't necessarily, I wouldn't classify that as probable cause, but it is in the area of reasonable suspicion. He had enough information to go and to go stop this citizen and find out what was really going on. So if you have any questions or comments, put them in the chat, y'all, so I can respond to them later on.
Officer number 2 quickly approaches the Lexus and attempts to talk to the suspect. He repeatedly tells her to stop and get out of the running car. It's well within the legal authority of police to temporarily stop and detain anyone believed to be part of a potential crime.
Yes.
Officer 1 appears to notice what his colleague is doing and walks over to assist. As Officer 2 continues to loudly tell the driver to get out of the car, Officer 1 walks past him briskly and moves around to the front of the car. Police officers are generally...
Now, this first officer right here who's talking to her, he's making contact, he's talking to her through the window. Totally fine.
at greater risk either directly in front of or behind a car for obvious reasons. Drivers can drive forward or backward into the officers when they're in that most vulnerable position.
Now, this right here, as someone also mentioned in the comments, the officer voluntarily or intentionally placing himself in front of that vehicle. Now, I can't speak on their tactics for that police department. I don't know. But to me, that is a horrific tactic. To place yourself in front of a vehicle. All I know, I can tell you this much: we were never taught anything remotely like that here in Las Vegas. Never. Because you're basically asking to get ran over, possibly. If you have a vehicle and you want to back your vehicle or drive your vehicle up in front of them, and even then, that's not the greatest tactic, because you don't know if they're in possession of a firearm or something along those lines. They could shoot you through the glass. You just don't know what's going on. But that would have been much smarter, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to just walk up to this car and place myself in front of the vehicle. That was, I don't understand his mindset when it came down to that. That's not my first problem. The first problem is her refusal to exit the vehicle when the officer confronted her. That's my first issue, because according to the police report and the body cam footage, she asked them multiple times. The police report said over a dozen times they asked her to get out of the vehicle and she refused. I constantly speak on this issue that compliance is the most important aspect of a police interaction. If none of y'all paid attention to anything I said or remembered anything I say throughout the course of this video, remember this: compliance is the most important aspect for you as a citizen when coming in contact with the police. Why? Because whether that officer is right or wrong, you can deal with that issue down the road later on. But in order to keep yourself safe, your best bet is to comply with the officer's orders, comply with the officer's commands. That's your best bet. That's the number one way. You give me almost, now I can't say for every incident, but you name to me the vast majority of incidents in modern history over the last 10 years or so. Too many times you'll see a citizen, suspect, individual who is non-compliant with law enforcement, with the police officer's verbal commands. Time and time again, you'll see that. And what happens is once you go there, you open the doorway. And again, I've said this countless times. You open the doorway for almost anything to take place. Once you become physically resistant, physically combative, you are just asking for problems. If you are completely innocent, you didn't do anything, but a police officer arrives on the scene and he or she tells you to get out of your vehicle, the wise move, as unpopular as it may be, I don't know why, honestly, the wise move is to stop, put that vehicle in the park, keep your hands visible to the best of your ability, and get out of that car. That is your best bet. If you want to stay alive, if you want to survive, that's your best bet. But let's let the video continue here. I'll get into a bit more of that as the video proceeds.
Generally, police training teaches that when two officers have approached a car on foot or intend to interview a suspect on the street, they will take a position that gives them the best advantage for observing what the suspect is doing.
Contact
In
and
police
cover.
parlance, this is simply referred to as contact and cover. One officer is attempting to contact the person to be interviewed, while the assisting officer is providing cover or oversight of the scene.
Oversight, cover of the scene in case something goes down, because as the contact officer, you're the contact officer. Contact it meaning the officer that actually makes physical contact, verbal contact with the suspect, with the citizen. That's your primary function, is to pay attention to what they're doing inside the vehicle. The cover officer, he sees the blind spots of the other officer, and he's also paying attention what's going on around him. Both of the officers have to deal with what's going on around them. Both of them have to address that issue. But it's easy to get really laser focused when you're dealing with someone inside the vehicle, because there's so many blind spots, there's so many little compartments, there's so many ways or things that, or areas that can become deadly to you. You have the crack in between the seats, under the seat, center console, glove compartment, so many areas. What the individual may be carrying on them personally or physically, so many potential danger spots. So their primary focus should be what's going on. And if they have someone in the back seat, even more so. Multiple passengers, so many issues. So contact and cover is a very important principle in law enforcement.
Officers are trained that one of the most dangerous encounters they face on the job involves a driver seated in a car. It's dangerous because there are many places in a car where a weapon can be hidden and the driver's hands are often out of view. While this suspect didn't have a weapon, the officers didn't know that at the time.
Excellent point. Another thing I want to bring up is the reality that in law enforcement, I think you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood. Oh man, I'm drawing blanks on the numbers, but there's well over 1,000, 1,500, more if I'm not mistaken. I'm thinking it's closer to the neighborhood of 4,000, but don't quote me on that 100% right now. I'm drawing a blank on the numbers. But there's so many times where an officer gets injured or attacked, has a violent attack on them. I think the number's in around 4,300 or something like that. I'll do some research and I'll comment on it. I'll probably put it in the community tab on YouTube, or post it also on Facebook if you follow me there. But there's so many times where an officer gets into a physical confrontation, whether it's a shooting, knife attack, just a physical fight while they're making vehicle stops. And we are told in most law enforcement agencies that a vehicle stop is potentially one of the most dangerous stops you can be on, because that and domestic violence, they're terrible. They are notorious for officers getting harmed during those two citizen encounters. Let's proceed.
19 seconds into the encounter, the suspect rolls her window down a few inches and asks why she's being stopped. Officer 2 tells her that a Kroger employee has accused her of stealing. Citizens can ask why they are being detained or ordered to comply, and in most cases, when there's time and no urgent circumstances, the officer should provide an answer, as Officer 2 does. Ohio law requires everyone to comply with the lawful order of a police officer. Although she's been ordered to get out of the running car many times by now, the driver starts to turn the steering wheel to the right as Officer 1 is directly in front of the car, in a clearly vulnerable position. Officer number 1 draws his firearm and again loudly orders the woman to stop the car. Police officers are trained to draw their firearms when threatened with deadly force, which can be from a gun, a knife, or a vehicle. In the next second, the driver steps on the gas and the car moves forward. When you look at side-by-side footage from both officers' body cameras, you can see that the suspect's car pushes Officer 1 backwards several feet. It's clear from the video that the car makes contact with the officer. In the next second, you can see that both of Officer 1's feet are off the ground. At this moment, Officer 1 fires a single shot.
I'm pausing right there, y'all. Again, I don't want YouTube taking this video down. I fast forward the video a few seconds and we'll pick it up here.
Knowing whether the driver is in control of the car. When the car stops, they act quickly to get the driver out of the car.
I'll move up a little bit, y'all.
Video to make observations of what I saw from the officer's body-worn camera video.
All right, I think that's enough right there. So now, I referenced my two primary problems. Let's back up out of here where this guy's at. I referenced my two primary problems in this initial incident. I'll leave it right here. My two primary issues, well, one was initially when the officer sought to make contact with Takaya, she refused to obey. And here's another point that I haven't heard anyone discuss as of yet. Did she actually steal anything from the store? No one is saying, and let me make this for the record, no one is saying that she should have been shot because she stole something. That's not the issue. I tell people repeatedly, if you are jaywalking, walking across the street when against the light, and an officer makes contact with you, the officer is justified in making contact with you because you violated the law, laws of the road. But if you decide that you're going to pull out a knife and lunge at the officer after he's attempting to make contact with you for driving or for jaywalking, then the reason you were shot wasn't because you jaywalked. That was the reason the officer made contact with you in the first place. In this situation, the reason Takaya was shot are twofold, but primarily was due to the fact that she was in a 2,000-pound vehicle plus and decided to drive off with that officer in front of her. She made that choice. And that's one incident. That's one thing that I rarely ever hear in these modern discussions when it comes to BLM and all these other activists, like that one social justice advocate speaking on this incident, is where is the personal accountability? He was quick to want to get on the officer and talk about what the officer should have done. And to some degree, he was accurate. The officer did make some poor choices during this encounter, placing yourself physically in front of the vehicle. Dumb move. This situation ain't that serious. And even worse, if the situation is a serious encounter, I ain't putting my physical body in front of a car. I'm not doing that. A fool would do that. Because now you're giving this guy or whoever, an opportunity to run you down. He probably assumed that she wouldn't do that, but that's just not a smart move because we all see how quickly it escalated. So again, going back to my initial complaint was her lack of compliance. And then two, the officer placing himself in front of the vehicle. And again, we don't even know if she stole anything. So I'm sure as time goes on, that's become less and less of an issue. because you're dealing with a woman now who was killed, who was shot, and a tragedy, a pregnant woman and mother of two moms, mother of two children. That makes it even more tragic. But it also points to the reality of just the choices we make, the decisions we make. And when it comes to decisions, we're often told, and I'm thankful for this rule when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to the reasonable officer perspective or standard, there's an aspect of that that involves officers making split-second decisions in situations that are often volatile and constantly evolving. Once the vehicle started driving, that was the case. But his initial actions of placing himself in front of the vehicle, I think that's the area where he's going to receive the vast majority of criticism. And I think that's 100% justified that move should be highly criticized and questioned because it was totally unnecessary. But most importantly, we have to understand that vehicles are potentially deadly weapons. They just are. People get ran over all the time. I don't know how many thousands of people die every year from traffic-related accidents, being ran over, whether it's because they were jaywalking or someone uses their vehicle willfully as a weapon. So situations like this, again, they are tragic. There's nothing to celebrate. It's heartbreaking, this entire incident, but on so many levels, this was unnecessary. But when it comes down to her taking the vehicle and making the conscious decision to put it in drive and then trying to get away, that's when everything changed. And that right there is when the officer, his actions as far as shooting her were justified. Because who knows what could have happened had he not done that. But like I said, there's so many details and there's so many nuances when it comes to a police use of force. So many factors that are involved when it comes to determining whether a shooting or a use of force is justified. Because then you're also dealing with the fact that, again, she wasn't moving very fast at the moment, but it doesn't take a whole lot of speed to stop somebody to run you over. It doesn't take you going that fast, especially if you're right there, if you place yourself right in front of the vehicle. But him shooting her, that could have made matters worse because who knows, she could have stepped on the gas and taken off and drove even faster. Man, there's so many factors. That's why the decision-making of the officer and the citizen, but in this case, I'm addressing the choices made by the officer. They're so important. But again, going back to the beginning, when it's all said and done, every decision that we make matters. And when we come in contact with the police, we have to be mindful of that. So let me share with you, y'all, a little bit more information here in regard to how we as citizens here in the United States, or here anywhere actually, but here, citizens, those of us who proclaim the name of Christ, how we should act when coming in contact with law enforcement or dealing with the government in general. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13, therefore submit yourself to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme or to governors, as to those who are sent by him for punishment of evildoers, for the praise of those who do good. Now, this isn't just willy-nilly doing whatever the government tells you. It's addressing, who are we talking about? Who was Peter talking about here? Or to governors, as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good, which she wasn't doing at the time, if she was guilty of stealing, and even if she wanted to, even if she wasn't guilty of that, her non-compliance demonstrated that she was guilty of she broke a law. She broke a law by not complying. For this is the will of God, that by doing good, you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. As free, yet not using your liberality as a cloak for vice, but as a bondservant of God, honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. That's pretty cut and dry right there in a situation like this. This isn't just willfully, blindly following and doing whatever the government tells you to do. When the government acts righteously, we have a duty to act. We have a duty to obey that as Christians. And then the most popular series of verses in the Bible when it comes to the obedience or the duty of a Christian to be obedient to government. And again, not just doing what everybody tells you to do simply because they say they're the government. There's such a thing as lawful and unlawful. Well, I'm thinking more military right there, but there's such a thing as doing what is lawful and what is unlawful. That also applies in the nation. And also doing what the government is, a government agent is trying to tell you what to do, and ultimately what God wants us to do, which far supersedes what man could ever try to tell us. But Romans chapter 13, submitting to the government. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Again, we're talking about a righteous ruler here. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore, you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. And I'll stop right there as far as the biblical verses. Right there, we have biblical justification for being obedient. So, in closing, how can we remedy this? How can we prevent something like this from? I don't want to say in closing, but for future reference, how can we prevent something like this from ever happening again? For those of you who are in the chat or watching this later, if you're in the chat watching it live, share your comments in the chat. But if you're watching this later on, how can we prevent something like this from going down? What are your thoughts? I'm going to let I wish I had the Jeopardy music going on. I'll let it play. But what are the easiest ways to keep something like this from going down? I'll give you one clue. I mean, I pretty much named the primary means already, but just one, doing what you're told. First of all, don't commit any crimes. Again, I don't know if she did or didn't. But if you're thinking about it, don't do it. Bad move. So don't put yourself against the law. Don't put yourself in a position where law enforcement has to come in contact with you and deal with you. That's one. Again, if you're contacted or ordered to do so by the law enforcement, then you comply and you do what you're told. Those two aspects could have prevented this woman from dying, flat out. And then again, if you're a cop, be smarter about where you place yourself physically. I would never do that. Never have done that. Now, I put my vehicle in front of cars, got rammed. I've had that happen to me before. Not the most fun thing in the world, honestly. But that's a complete, slobbering over here. Forgive me. But that's the first thing. Those are simple things you can do to have greater control over the situations. Control your decisions. Be obedient. Do what you're told. And on the other hand, as an officer, just being wise with your tactics. Let me check out some of the comments here, man, because I see a lot of people commenting here. What's up, brother? And he will commend you. Amen. Talking about what scripture said. This was good commendation, looks like played out. Okay, yeah, for those of y'all who can jump in the chat, my man Benjamin Michael posted something for y'all to check out if you want to see what he's talking about there. Hey, Chris, if a person is going to refuse to comply, I wouldn't trust them not to try to take off. I agreed. I can't argue with that. If they're already demonstrating their unwillfulness to comply, you have to assume it's a safe assumption to make that they will possibly flee, for that matter. So where you place yourself, you got to be wise with it, y'all. Escalating an already bad situation. Absolutely. On both ends to some degree. On both ends to some degree. Now, if she stole something and didn't want to get caught, if she stole something, I can understand her not wanting to get caught, but you're going to take off from a cop. I mean, honestly, I just think that is such an ignorant move. Such an ignorant move. Running from the police. Like, where does that ever get? How does that ever work? Honestly. I see y'all got the serious conversation going on here in the chat. Anyway, okay, here we go. The law enforcement brass needs to step up on the content released to the media. Officers need to remember to assess wisely their actions. I agree, definitely. I think that is the most important thing that we can do as individual officers is to make sure that our skills are sharpened, that we're tactically sound, and that we make good decisions. We make good, wise decisions so that, like I said, because on so many areas here, this incident shouldn't have ended up like this. It shouldn't have went down like this. I appreciate y'all, by the way. Let me let that be known. For those of you who want to support me, if you're on YouTube, there's an area there if you want to support what it is I'm doing, because I'm putting out a video every day and I want to upgrade my content. So if you feel as if you want to support me, no pressure whatsoever. But if you're following me on YouTube, there's an area there if you want to be a blessing to what I'm trying to do, because I want to upgrade some of my equipment, but I'm not trying to pressure any of y'all. I put all this stuff out there primarily because I want to be a blessing. I want to help other believers. I want to help other citizens make better choices and better understand why the police do what they do, and to address some of these worldview issues primarily from a Christian conservative perspective, because there's so many things happening in our culture. So I want to be, not that I'm the wisest dude in the world, but I think I have a lot of experiences over the years, whether it be in my law enforcement career, whether it be in my Christian journey, the things I've studied and read from politically. I think I can offer a pretty unique voice in this current age with all this arguing and fighting and backbiting going on. Play stupid game, win stupid prizes. She gets no sympathy from me. I do feel badly about her children losing their mother, but she made her choice. I can't argue with that. It's really tragic. Now, can a person have a momentary lapse in judgment? Now, I don't know anything about this woman. I don't know if she has a history of making poor choices, possibly. But can a person make a dumb decision? It sounded like there was a smash and grab or something like that going on, or something close to that. I don't know. Yeah, it's possible. But again, when it's all said and done, we are all ultimately responsible for what we do. And she placed her actions primarily, placed those kids, even her unborn one, in this situation. It's beyond tragic, honestly. What's up, Ted? Good to see you. Oh, Kathleen, too. I'm sorry. I didn't say hey, and thanks for stopping by. I'm curious to see if the Kroger security cams will show whether the woman is actually guilty of shoplifting. I would feel bad for the person who reported her, especially if it turned out that she hadn't shoplifted. Very true. Yeah, that would suck big time. At the same time, and there would probably be some guilt if you're if you thought you saw her shoplifting, come to find out that you were wrong. There would probably be some guilt on your end to some degree, but he didn't tell her to take off and run. If you didn't steal anything, just stop. If you didn't steal anything, just stop. Show the officer that you don't have anything, and she could have been gone, long gone. Honestly, it didn't have to end this way. I keep saying that, but it's so true. This situation should not have escalated to the point to where now you have a dead woman, a dead baby, 2 young kids who don't have their mom, and officers on paid administrative leave or at least one officer on leave, who, especially the shooter. None of this should have. There was no reason or no need for any of this to take place. Once they refuse to comply, the only thing in their mind is their way out. Stealing is ignorant to begin with, 100%. And it is very sad, no doubt about that. She was single, 2 children, and pregnant with the third. Yep. She had a history of bad choices. Oh, really? Now, I hadn't heard that. And if you could share something in the chat, if you have a link or something like that, I don't doubt it, because for you to do something like that, I think it's weird. The average citizen doesn't attempt to flee from the cops. I don't think so. The vast majority of people, I would dare say 99% of the vehicle, 99.9% of the vehicle stops I made, people did exactly what I asked them to do. 99.99. So you already have to have something going on in your head, or have done something you shouldn't have done, to make a conscious decision to take off from the police. Every time I lit somebody up, meaning turn my lights and sirens on, pulled someone over, or almost every time, they complied. I'm struggling to recall moments where people didn't stop. I know it's happened, but it's very rare. Things happen, but this could have been avoided if she just got out of the car and addressed the accusations. No question about it. No question about it. And when it comes to because I was critical of the cops or the officer, but in the hierarchy of poor decisions made in this incident, her choices were the primary factors that caused this situation to go poorly. Her bad choices. Saying her personal choices demonstrates a history of bad choices. Not that I have information, just MO. Okay, I understand. I got you. I thought maybe you had somebody had reported something else differently, but I appreciate that. Somebody responded to Ted, I worked in loss prevention for about 8 years. When they run, they are guilty. Right. Every one of them stops if they are not. But nowadays, you can't do anything. That is a problem in and of itself. Right. I agree. I hope I didn't miss some of the conversation there. I think she's responding to Ted's comment earlier about whether she had shoplifted or not. Whoops. Sorry about that. But yeah, folks, horrible incident could have easily, and I'll repeat that, easily been avoided. And I'm sure my perspective may be unpopular with some, but I think it's the most simple, reasonable way to examine this. Now, unless you have some other agenda or some other perspective, unless you have some other information. Now, I don't want to even make an assumption like that, but unless you have other information that I'm not aware of, I'll be all ears or all eyes as well to read the information and come to you with a different conclusion. But when it's all said and done, I don't see how any new information can change based on the body cam footage. I heard that the family members were complaining that they wanted all the body cam footage, but what more do you need? Do you have all the information as to why the officers were there in the first place? You have why they attempted to make contact with her. And it seems pretty clear that she just chose not to comply. And then here we are, sadly. Here we are. The media has given young people the idea that they can refuse officers' authority. They absolutely have. And stay tuned, y'all, because in the very near future, I've been talking about this for a while, but in the very near future, I'll actually be putting out some material that I've been working my butt off on to really help address this issue when it comes to how people act when interacting with the police. So stay tuned in the very near future for that. You guys will be some of the first to know. I make the same point basically every single one of these events. If one chooses to resist or evade arrest, they immediately subject themselves to the competency or incompetency of an armed police officer. Bro, I've been saying that for years, but the way you put it was perfect. And I'm stealing that. I'm letting you know, brother, I'm stealing that. You never know their level of training, mindset, competency, etc. It's playing with fire. For example, standing in front of a vehicle, not exactly a competent choice. Right. But doesn't make her decision to drive forward less deadly. You nailed it, brother. You nailed it 100%. I got to read that set point again. If one chooses to resist or evade arrest, they immediately subject themselves to the competency or incompetency of an armed police officer. That is so perfectly stated. Seriously. Dude, stolen permit. I appreciate you, brother. You know that. I appreciate you, man. But that was so perfectly stated. Knowing what I know as being in law enforcement for all the time that I was, and on top of that, being a trainer, knowing what I know, and seeing officers in atrocious shape, officers with a horrific demeanor, officers who only train when they're made to, when they're forced to, because every quarter you have to do defensive tactics or go qualify with your gun, who never take the time to go and train themselves. And then when it comes time to qualify, they start getting nervous. I'm not going to say that that's the majority, but there are too many with this mindset. I'm calling it what it is. And I'm pretty confident that that's in the vast majority of agencies across the country. Now, you can feel, I guess, if you want to go into your everyday job with a not feeling comfortable or competent or confident in your ability to engage a suspect, whether that's with your firearm or verbally or physically, if necessary, if that's what you want to do, hey, more power to you, I guess. I wouldn't even say more power to you. If do what you feel is right, so to speak. Of course, it isn't right. It's foolish, because I say time and time again that you are not only putting the citizen in danger, not only putting your own self in danger, but you're putting your coworkers, your peers in danger by being a fool, by being foolish with your skills, by not sharpening your skills when you're in law enforcement, by not staying in, you ain't even got to be in peak shape, but you should maintain a high level of physical fitness. You should maintain a high level of proficiency and skill when it comes to your defensive tactics, when it comes to the use of your firearm, because you just never know what kind of situation that you're going to be facing. Like I like doing CrossFit. I do some CrossFit style workouts, typically once or twice a week around some of my other workouts that I do, a lot of my running, my biking, my strength training work. One of the principles behind CrossFit is being prepared for the known and the unknowable, or the unknown and unknowable. So you build a high level of general fitness. So if you ever have to run long or climb something or pick up something, you have a solid base of fitness so that you're better prepared for whatever comes your way. You're going to have to help push a car off the street. You may have to be in a foot pursuit and run someone down, chase someone down. You may have to fight for your life. You may have to climb 20 flights of stairs to address an active shooter. You just don't know. You may have to run from cover to cover, bounding, and all that kind of stuff. You just never know what situation you might be in. So why not take 3-4 days out of your week to train to a high enough level of intensity so that you're prepared to deal with these encounters? Why not go to the range every other week? Heck, a lot of departments, they help pay for, they cover your firearm fees, especially if you're in a larger agency. training and things like that can be tax deductible. Go get a gym membership. Find a group of guys, group of people to work out with. Find a group of people to train your defensive tactics, your martial arts skills. Put yourself in a solid position so that you're not. And I know kind of went off key here. I went on a little bit of a tangent, but I'm really passionate about cops being better prepared to handle their business. Man, oh man, it drives me up the wall. And I tell people right now, I'm 53 years old. I've been retired since 2014. And I'm in some of the best shape of my life right now, even at my age. And I ride my bike 4 days a week, early in the morning, before I hit the gym and start lifting and hitting the stairs or whatever I'm doing. CrossFit style workouts. It's that important, y'all. And but that can also demonstrate a lack of care, of concern for your overall well-being. And that can open the door for, well, if you're not taking care of yourself physically, how are your other tactics? But I can go on and on. Anyway, y'all, man, I really appreciate y'all stepping in. Do me a favor. If you appreciate content like this, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Follow me, follow my content, share this content, especially this video right here, because I think there's a lot of helpful and useful information. If you know of any families out there that have any kids, young people who may have a different perspective on these issues, especially in the area of dealing with the police, please share this video. I want this perspective to go out to more and more voices. My channel is growing. I appreciate all y'all for supporting me over the years, but especially over the last couple of months, the channel has really taken off. I'm thankful to y'all. But once again, like, subscribe, follow, comment down below. Share your thoughts. How do you feel about this entire incident? But as always, in the meantime, stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join the conversation. I'm out.